Today's bike review is going to be the new Rocky Mountain Slayer that they sent over a few months ago. So much confidence this bike gives. Whew. Oh my God. Now, in terms of what I didn't like, Rocky Mountain does have frame storage. It is used. The scariest part about being on this bike was riding some very gnarly trails in our backyard. And they're trying to figure out, man, I really want to take my riding to the next level. I have a full-time job. I'm not a professional free rider. What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another bike review. As we said earlier, we went independent this year with awesomemtb.com. That's our new mountain bike media site. And we have a lot of buyer guides and bike reviews coming at you guys, as well as additional travel content. Today's bike review is going to be the new Rocky Mountain Slayer that they sent over a few months ago. I've had a few months on this bike, like I said, put this thing through a variety of terrain and really tried figuring out what this bike is and who it's made for. Rocky Mountain claims the Slayer is a 180mm free ride bike. I would have to disagree slightly. There's some things that I absolutely love about this bike, as well as some stuff that I feel like does change how you're going to perceive this bike. Let's start off with the bike itself. So like I said, Rocky Mountain is saying that this is a 180mm free ride style bike. They sent over the C50 build for testing, which is actually a carbon frame. They have this in carbon alloy. This is the carbon frame with the Shimano drivetrain. It's been interesting going back to that Shimano XT drivetrain. Paired with that Shimano drivetrain, you get Shimano XT brakes on here, 4-piston setup. These things have been so powerful. You also get a Fox DHX2 coil shock on here. It's a 2-position, which I do feel like is necessary for the Rocky Mountain Slayer. Also comes with a race face dropper post on here. I did end up putting my Specialized Mirror Saddle Pro. I did make a few tweaks to the build itself though. On the handlebars, I actually ended up going to the 1-Up carbon bars. I really feel like that was a huge upgrade for me on this bike. And I did end up putting my Onyx 38 on here. I've been trying to do a long-term review of the DVO Onyx 38 and it's been actually going insanely well. I really do like how plush this fork feels. It tracks insanely well and there's still plenty of stiffness. I feel like the crown is where a lot of that magic happens. Stay tuned for a long-term review of the DVO Onyx on there. Now, like I mentioned, there were some things that I wasn't too fond of. I feel like a lot of it's going to be in that wheel area. This comes stock with double down tires as well as CushCore already installed. Rocky Mountain is actually one of the few brands out there that actually specs CushCore stock straight out of the box. So yeah, double down tires with CushCore, Assegai up front with a DHR2 in the rear. And I do feel like that is going to lead to a few points I will talk about a little bit later on. Now, before we get into the actual review of this bike, let's go for a quick ride so I can give you guys a little bit of an idea of how this bike feels on the trail. For this test ride, we are in Aliso Wilderness Park and we're making our way up. I will say, when I first hopped on the Rocky Mountain Slayer, something that was really apparent to me is how comfortable the pedaling position is and also how heavy this build is. So it's kind of a juxtaposition, right? Because you think comfortable pedaling position. However, this bike does have double down tires and CushCore that I'll touch on a little bit later. Once again, if you are a Southern California local, you know what we're about to climb. This is definitely the steepest pitch of this climb, the Slayer. From the first time I tried this on it, no issues whatsoever, which is crazy given how slack that head angle is. I do have the rear shock locked out, but once again, you guys, that seat angle position is incredible on this thing. 77.5 degrees. All right, so this is probably the most popular downhill on the side, Five Oaks Trail. And while the Rocky Mountain Slayer might be a lot for this trail, it's freaking insanely fun on it as well. Look how stable the bike is. Stability is going to be a word I'm going to use a lot throughout this review because it's kind of the only thing you can kind of describe this bike. Been through this, a lot of braking bumps, barely even feel them. And something that I have noticed, especially riding with friends, I am so much faster on this bike than I am with any other bike in my quiver. A lot of that's gonna come down to, once again, I'm just gonna huck that. You're just able to do lines like that. 180 mils of travel is insane on the trail. It just gives you this pro-like confidence to your riding if you're not a pro. And that's why I think if you're looking for a bike, don't just rule this out because it's called a free ride bike. I think there's a lot of trail potential for a lot of riders out there. But once again, you also have that added confidence from the 38mm DVO Onyx up there, as well as that Fox DHX2 coil shock. Let's just huck into here. So crazy what you can do on this. Such a confident, inspiring rig. Oh my God. This is one called Stair Steps. And this one, man, I feel like it's right up the Slayer's alley. Oh my God, so much confidence. I don't even need to pick a line. It's insane. Now, talking about stability through chunk, I think that's where this bike really impresses me. Is you can kind of come into anything and just feel so controlled, even if you're slightly offline, which is the scary part. But at the same time too, if you need to reel it back in, it's very easy to control this bike. Stair steps is always a fun trail, but this is too. This is called Rocket, and this one's a little bit more pedally, but it's really not an issue with the Rocky Mountain. The suspension design on this thing is so rad. It has such a playful nature on it, even though over chunk, like you guys saw earlier, so much stability. Now we're going into the rock garden. This thing just gonna eat it all up. Gonna try and stay online, but I don't really think I need to. Famous last words, let's not say that. God, there's so much confidence this bike gives. Woo! Oh my God. I don't think I've ever gone that fast through that chunk section. Once again, I keep going back to the Rocky Mountain being playful. This is definitely a more pedally style trail with a lot of good corners. As you guys can tell, the Rocky Mountain, just in and out of corners, feels insane. Definitely impressed by how playful this bike is. And you really can smash corners. Keep going back to the build on this bike. I really do think the Rocky Mountain Slayer can be a great bike for a lot of riders looking to progress their riding and maybe have a bike park nearby, or maybe they just like riding techier trails. Because once again, the confidence this bike inspires is pretty mind-blowing. Oh my God, so many ruts. God, what a crazy winter. And yeah, I definitely think that if you were to set this bike up with a little bit of a lighter wheel set, would be insane. And you'd still have a Whistler bike park bike, or Mammoth, or whatever your bike parking choice is. Freaking so good. All right, let's get back and talk about it. Now let's talk about a couple of things that I love about this bike, and then we're gonna get into some things that I didn't like. So starting off with how this bike climbs, this is actually something that I'm gonna give Rocky Mountain a tremendous amount of credit. This bike climbs so well, especially when stuff gets steep. Now the bike itself has a 77.5-degree seat angle, so you can really feel like you are on top of that bottom bracket on steeper pitches climbs, and I really felt like I was able to put that power down and power through climbs that I really didn't think that I would be able to get up on a 180mm freeride bike. Both in and out of the saddles, I felt like it was a very comfortable pedaling position. I will say I did have to utilize that lockout. I feel like that's not going to be a shocker to anyone, especially with that coil shock and that super buttery initial stroke. I did find myself utilizing that lockout a ton on climbs. I did still feel like a decent amount of anti-squat on this thing, and especially when I got out of the saddle and really tried to power in between sections of trails, the bike does have a very lively feel. And those of you that don't know, Rocky Mountain actually utilizes a Ride 4 system in this bike. So you basically have 4 different geometries and different ways you can set up this bike. I personally really did like the 3 position, which is considered neutral for them. And from what I've heard, Rocky Mountain actually designs the bikes in the 3 position, which is why I feel like I did really enjoy that. I did play around with this bike in its slackest position, which actually takes the head angle from about 63 degrees to 62.5. It does end up slackening the seat angle. And I will say, for me personally, climbing anything steep in that slack mode of this bike, that is where I was like, okay, this might actually be a free ride bike. Now, for everyone's favorite part of probably every review, it's gonna be the downhills. And as you guys could tell, I had so much fun on this thing on the downhills. It really is crazy what you can ride with 180mm of travel. The scariest part about being on this bike was riding some very gnarly trails in our backyard, just never feeling like I was actually riding those trails. I remember a couple of trails where I definitely had that pucker feeling on other bikes, being on the Rocky Mountain Slayer, riding those features and thinking, wait, what is going on? That fear really wasn't there. And I felt like this bike inspired a level of confidence within me that I never knew I had. Now, another thing to note, even though it has 180mm of travel, one thing that continuously impressed me was how poppy and playful this bike was. I definitely thought that there's no way 180mm of travel is going to be able to pop in and out of corners. The Rocky Mountain Slayer continuously surprised me. I feel like a lot of it's going to be their suspension design. Their smooth link system definitely feels very active when it needs to be. However, as soon as you get on the the pedals, it kind of tightens up slightly so you're able to kind of pop in and out of corners. However, when you do need that suspension activated, like when you're going through big chunk or you just hit a big drop, I mean, the suspension is very controlled. Yeah, overall, very impressed by how this thing went downhill. I don't think it's gonna be a surprise to anyone. I would say this is definitely gonna be one of the most confidence-inspiring bikes I've ridden, and I had a blast on this thing in the downhills. Now, in terms of what I didn't like, Rocky Mountain does have frame storage. It is used with this flap right here. This is actually a magnetic box, and then inside you do have frame storage. I really do appreciate the effort of having the storage within the frame. I think that is gonna be something that most companies are gonna have to go with. Now, I will say the magnetic system, at one point, this actually came off. It actually fell off of the trail, off of a cliff. On the new Instinct and the Altitude, they actually ended up going with a lock box. That is something to note, the magnetic box there. Just be careful of this thing and make sure you're putting it in correctly. I do feel like the wheel tire cush core combo is holding this bike back. For the wheels itself, like I said, it has double downs, cush core, and alloy wheels. That combo right there isn't for me. I know for some riders out there, they might need the double down tires. I think some riders out there definitely need the cush core. The cush core double down, there's so much going on in the tire setup. I'd probably go with the double down instead of the cush core. It is cool that you get it and you can take the cush core off. I do feel like going with a lighter weight setup there is gonna change drastically how this bike rides. However, a bigger issue to me than the cush core double down combo was actually this wheel set. So this is actually the Raceface Arc 30, I believe, wheels from Raceface, and their alloy wheels. I do feel like that hub is probably one of the least engaging hubs I've tested in a while. I feel like a bike like this definitely needs a higher engaging hub. I feel like for a lot of technical rock maneuvers, definitely want the ability to kind of micro pedal to kind of get this bike up and over obstacles, especially with that weight. Me personally, I would have probably liked to sacrifice the cush core and go with a higher engaging hub if I was looking at an OEM perspective, like how Rocky Mountain is speccing this bike. That's just a recommendation that I would make. I feel like for most riders out there, if they were to get this bike, have a higher engaging hub and have a little bit of a lighter weight tire or wheel setup, it's going to drastically change how this bike's going to perform on the trails. And I think a lot of riders out there are going to be thoroughly impressed at what a 180 millimeter bike can do and how versatile that bike can get. If you're a rider out there that maybe you've been hesitant to kind of see how far you can kind of push your riding, there's certain features out there that you want to be able to hit, and it's almost a good stepping stone for a lot of riders if they are trying to take their riding to the next level. Obviously, if Rocky Mountain was designing this bike strictly for free ride purpose and free rider riders out there, that's not going to be an issue because they're already very talented riders. However, I do feel like a lot of riders might actually benefit from the Rocky Mountain Slayer, and I do feel like for a lot of riders out there, this bike is going to open a lot of doors in terms of descending and help take a lot of riders' confidence, elevate it a little bit, and just give them the tools necessary to take their riding to the next level. And I do feel like the Rocky Mountain Slayer is a great tool for that. But one last interesting note about the Rocky Mountain Slayer, and this is going to be something that's going to be interesting to see develop over the next few years of bikes. So Rocky Mountain actually released the Instinct this year as well as the Altitude, but I want to compare the Slayer to the Instinct. So frame weight on this bike. This frame is actually only about 1.5 pounds heavier than the Instinct. The Instinct is a 140 millimeter trail bike, or what Rocky Mountain is classifying that bike as, trail/enduro, and the Slayer is a 180 millimeter freeride bike. Once again, there's only about 1.5 pounds weight difference. The Instinct is coming in about a degree steeper head angle than the Slayer overall. So in the slackest setting of the Instinct, you have a 63.5 degree head angle, and the slackest setting of the Slayer, you have a 62.5 degree head angle. You have 40 millimeters more travel in the Slayer than the Instinct. However, that Instinct is going to be such a capable bike when it comes to trail settings, very efficient. You're probably going to have faster overall times. However, with the Slayer, you're not going to get that much of a weight difference if you were to build these things up equivalently, this and the Instinct. About 1.5 pounds at least, I would say, is going to be the weight difference, but you're going to get 40 millimeters more travel and a degree slacker in the head angle on this thing, which is going to be the right bike for a lot of riders out there. Man, I think if you're looking for one bike to do everything well, obviously I would probably go with the Instinct. For some riders out there that might not be concerned with time and they're trying to figure out, man, I really want to take my riding to the next level. I have a full-time job. I'm not a professional free rider. Yeah, I am looking to tackle certain features out there, but I still don't want this crazy quiver of bikes. I just want one bike, get out there, do everything well. I do feel like building up the Slayer in a lightweight build, similar to something that you would build up the Instinct with, but only only sacrificing that 1.5 pound frame weight, just kind of adding that, man, you are gonna get a bike that's gonna be so stable and competent on the downhills. It's really gonna give you the confidence to tackle those features that maybe you've been skipping out on, but still have a bike that's gonna be capable for the bike parks and you're gonna be able to climb your backyard mountains on. The Slayer is gonna be a solid contender for that. So like I said, 2024 is gonna be a very interesting year for bikes, how they are set up and how different build kits affect different bikes and how they perform on the trails. I know that was a mouthful. If you guys have any other questions about the Rocky Mountain Slayer or any Rocky Mountain bike in the lineup or any bike in general, let us know in the comment section. We also have a link to our website where we do free bike consulting. Be sure to hit us up if you have any other bike buying questions. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this review. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more adventure and travel content. With that being said, until next time, you guys, ride awesome. Phew.